Please welcome John Novak. John is a Columbus-based artist who specializes in coloring graphic novels, as you probably know. He's worked on books from First Second, Learner, Disney Junior, Random House, and Graphics. In their review, the New York Times said of his work on Giants Beware, Novak's vibrant, full-color landscapes filled with lush purples and greens are an exciting backdrop for the threesome's adventures. You can view his most recent colors in Call Me Iggy, a YA graphic novel that he did with his frequent collaborators and friends, Jorge, how do you say Jorge's last name? Aguirre and Rafael Rosado. He has a wife, daughter, and 2 rescue mutts. For what it's worth, Rafael Rosado is a special guest this year, and he will be appearing on Saturday at the library. But I'll go ahead and let you take it from here.
Great. Thank you very much. Thanks, Ben. All right. Welcome. We have another mic up here, so if you can't hear me though, I can use the handheld mic. So if anybody just gives me a signal or whatever, but hopefully my voice is loud enough. But anyway, usually given presentations to actually all the time. I've given presentations to kids in the past, so this is my first full grown-up panel. So hopefully it won't be too boring for you or too elementary. But anyway, let's get started. So. Anyway, I've been doing colors for graphic novels for about 12 years now. Whoops. Yeah, this is the first book I worked on that Jorge and Raf got me in for, and I've done quite a bit of just drawing and doing some kind of independent zines and graphic or comic books in the past, but I haven't and never done any color, especially digitally. So it was kind of a big learning curve. So I think there's probably a lot of things I would go back to and fix on this book, but I think overall it's pretty good. So my art training kind of won out over the newness factor. But anyway, and there's 2 more books in this series. They call it the Chronicles of Claudette. We'll look at some of those later. But anyway, I just wanted to start with basically my process. So once the writer has the script, and then Raf will do the pencils, and then he'll do the inks. So on this page, you can see the black and white artwork is Raf's artwork. And then either myself or sometimes I have a helpful person that will help me with what they call flat a page, where you just reduce each element to just basic bright colors, just so you kind of get a sense of what you're working with and what can be colored. And then you go through and add the real colors, but it's kind of a fun stage because you can just throw whatever color you want to differentiate the various elements of the page. My approach to building a page is generally I try to look at the script if there is one. Sometimes I've worked and they haven't had the full script done or the full set of dialogue, so things are kind of changing. But generally I get a basic idea of what the story is. And then Raf will send me the black and white artwork. So you can see here, this is the artwork he sent me. And then sometimes what happens is there'll be portions that we can change the intensity of the blacks. So you can, in this page, I decided to try to make it look more like kind of an older, kind of like an old photograph. And so what I did is I changed a lot of the line work to kind of like a muted indigo and tried to give it like a faded look. It's supposed to be set in Colombia 30 or some years ago, maybe 50 years ago. And so that's one approach. And then I also do some research to see what the buses in Colombia, how they're colored, because they're often very brightly colored. And then there you can see the finished artwork. And so sometimes generally Raf is one of those artists who's nice. He's he trusts me, and so for a background like this, he'll just do the basic, just kind of little sketches of where he wants the mountains to be, and he'll be oh, Novak, just fill in the rest. So in that respect, it's kind of nice. It's able to kind of stretch out creatively a little bit and do some kind of digital painting. I use Photoshop primarily. I've tried some of the other programs, but it's just like my muscle memory is with Photoshop, and so it's really hard to get into another application. Although Photoshop it's tough because there's so much you can do with it, so it gets a little cumbersome. But overall, it works great. Here's a good example of a challenging page. What I mean by that is that there's a lot of kind of odd color situations. So this is from the Call Me Iggy book, which was just published this year. And here Iggy is playing with the ghost of his grandfather video games. And so they're sitting in a dark room, and there's two of them, but the ghost is, we had to decide if he was going to be kind of corporeal or like non-corporeal or translucent. So we went through a lot of different iterations of like how we were going to do the line work. So at one point he kind of looked like a Jedi ghost with like glowing blue around him, but we were like, well, that's way too close to Star Wars. So then we decided just to go with just like kind of like a what they call a self-inked line. So basically the black and white artwork is just one solid other color. So we chose this kind of spiritual, not spiritual, what's the word I'm looking for? Afterworldly looking blue. And then we also kind of bleached out his color a little bit. But this page was still tricky because it's like, so the top panel, I had to figure out how to color what was supposed to be a video game screen. So I looked at some pictures of video games and tried to replicate at least like some of the colors and just some of the way they looked. But it's very tricky when it's basically drawn by Roth, and then I'm trying to still make it look like a video game. So I think, I don't know, it's pretty close. I tried to add some little pixelization and stuff. And then on top of that, you have the all the sound effects. So those have to stand out, but then you also have a bright screen. So there's a lot of kind of elements that kind of work together. And then down below, this is what I found really tricky, is to get the figures were getting the reflection from the TV screen, and they're sitting in a darkened room. So I was like, realistically, it probably wouldn't be quite as contrasty as it is. But I tried to amp up the color, like the screen was really bright, just to make them kind of sit and just pop. And then so they have shadows and stuff, which is kind of fun. Which it's kind of a overemphasization of reality, basically. So it's, Anyway, let's go on. So the elements that I kind of think about working with: lines, layers, and effects. So the lines are like black and white artwork that Roth gives me. The layers are the various like colors. I think of like, I usually do like a separate background color, and then I'll do a layer specifically for the characters. And then I'll do some effects, which could be like a brightening, or it could just be like a haze, or a fog, or a smoke effect, something like transparent. Lately, especially on Iggy, I was getting into doing whole like kind of photo filters over the whole page to kind of give it a maybe like a sepia look, or a kind of an amber, warm sunset kind of look. And so we can get into some of that. So this is a good page. This is where the ghost of Iggy's grandfather first shows up, and he's in the basement, so it's dark. And so basically I had to think of like, well, most basements are fairly dull in color and stuff, so I wanted to give it a little more something dramatic. So I went with kind of a deep dusty teal, and I wanted the blue of the grandfather to kind of stand out, so I had to kind of mute that quite a bit and darken it. But then you don't want to lose all of the background details. So I tried to amp up the contrast in the rafters and the little light coming from the doorway on the floor up. And then managed to do some modeling on the clothing. Generally, like for most of the pages, I don't get into quite the distinct painterly modeling of the forms, just because it's like it takes way too much time. Like this probably took me 3 times as long as any other page, and if I did that, I would never be able to finish a book. But it's really fun to do, and so I had to research like how the light would be hitting them in a dark space, but then also maybe kind of reflecting off the floor, and then you've got the dust effects, which is an element in the book, which if you read it, you'll understand. But basically there's clouds of dust, and then, so I tried to do some more effects, and then this is getting further along where now, whoops, there we go. So I've got some light beams streaming in from up above. I've added some shadows and kind of effects to the dust to give it like a little, when you see those floating dust motes, that hopefully you can see a little bit, little bits of those, just to kind of give it some more atmosphere. And because it's kind of a special page, so I've kind of probably went a little more extreme on this than others, but anyway. So here are some of the references that I would have used. Like, so you can see in this picture here that I got, I think it's from a Pixar film or short, that I got a lot of ideas for how to do the lighting effects on the figures, where you get like a kind of a direct light, but then you're also getting light that's bouncing off a surface, and so you're getting kind of like a nice like kind of glow to the figures. This one here, I think I really like the colors in that, and you'll see hints of that in the last few pages of the book, and we'll see one of those later. This one I just kind of, obviously, like Ghibli is, can't help but try to use some of their styles, and I look for them for a lot of how they do clouds and backgrounds. So sometimes I like to just focus on the individual panel, because in the storytelling, there's you have like the full page, and then within that, each panel has to tell part of the story, and sometimes you can kind of change up what you're emphasizing on a page. So here's the original artwork that Rolf sent me, the black and white. This is when I did the flatted. And I thought it's such a, I wanted to try something different with it, because I feel like it was kind of a special scene, and I wanted to kind of emphasize just the characters. So I left out his sketch of the fence, thinking that, well, I'll give it a try, but I thought he's going to tell me to put it back in, but he really liked the effect. So it's just like the characters in this kind of emptiness, and I feel like it kind of emphasizes the loneliness and the kind of the departing of the character. And anyway, so I was really happy because Rolf really liked that and that effect, and it worked out really nicely. Palettes, obviously, just are collections of colors that I use. So I try to limit my palettes somewhat, because otherwise it's pretty easy to just kind of go crazy on a page, and then you got a kind of a cacophony of colors. And especially with Photoshop, it's so easy just to like draw from all sorts of sources and colors, and I find that it's best when you can kind of edit that. And I think over the past like 10 years, I've definitely like got better about restraining my use of colors and limiting my palettes, and I think it works better for the pages. So here is a centerfold from the book, and obviously it's downtown Columbus, and it's like the end of their workday. And so I obviously, being from Columbus, I really wanted to kind of emphasize some of the beauty of the city, and also it's kind of starting to be a somewhat romantic moment. So I tried to pick some kind of softer pink and blue hues to kind of give it a slightly romantic, hazy look. And this one also, so the background, I self-inked all the black and white artwork. So I basically colored, each building, the inks that Rolf supplied to me, and to give it a slightly softer. But then I left the foreground characters black and white, help them kind of stand out and pop. And then you can see this is one palette I started with because I was looking at pictures of sunsets and cityscapes, and I was like, I really liked the colors on it, but it was like it just felt too garish, like it was like an expressionist painting or something, and it was just like too much. So it takes a lot of kind of tweaking and subduing a lot of the tones to kind of capture the effect I'm going for without losing. Ignore that stuff. Apparently I don't know how to make slides. So this is I think this is the final. So you get like the buildings are in shadow here, but then you get a lot of the tones from the sunset, the cool sky in the background, the pink clouds, which I think add a little kind of, hopefully a little romantic notion. And then there's the characters, and kept them like fairly simple. I wanted just to focus on the setting in this one, but yeah. This one I just had to show because Jorge, the writer of this book, is from Columbus, and he, like myself, has been obsessed with buffalo wings since high school. And he finally did a panel where I could color chicken wings, and I'm really proud of the sauces I did. So this is kind of a mild sauce. This is probably more of like a hot, like a blazing sauce. So I think I captured that really well, and that's Iggy and his older brother there. I just had to show that because back in college we used to go to the original Buffalo Wild Wings and Whack, which is totally different now. But anyway, line and color. So obviously the two elements that really have to merge. I'm leaving out writing here because that's more of the conceptual, what's the word, landscape that's built on. But let's see. But so this is a page where Raphael. I hope this is a little bit of a spoiler, but Iggy is with his grandfather, and they're looking at all the ghosts of his family from the past, and they're all like from basically like the South American lineage. And so you've got like Spanish conquistadors and slaves and Indians and just all sorts of people coming before them. And so I had to think about what I wanted to do to express their individual colors, but also to kind of keep it somewhat of a cohesive look on the page. And this is where I went and I found that palette that I really liked earlier. This one here, which to me just totally worked on that page. So you got the kind of nice sunny glow, but then you have kind of like some kind of colors that you wouldn't normally think of. Like there's some kind of like some purples and some strange kind of oranges and chartreuses in there. So anyway, so I tried to apply that to this page. So you can see it without the line work. This is what I was working with. And so and like these up front, the foreground, there was going to be a lot of dark inked lines over it, so I could kind of go for a slightly lighter to help them stand out a little bit. And so you could kind of see I had to reduce the saturation on a lot of these guys because they're, in the background, you didn't want them competing with all of the characters. Luckily, we early on decided that Iggy should be wearing a red t-shirt, so he stands out on most pages, which is nice. And then you got the Spanish conquistador here, and he's kind of a standout. And then you can kind of see how it works together. And we went back to that original kind of device of using the faded inked lines to kind of give it a slightly more softer effect, which I think works on the page, which is kind of nice. This was another tricky page. I just wanted to throw this in because it has like what's known as color holds. So it's basically like you're taking the black and white artwork and adding a color so that it's stands out by itself, but you're not doing it to the whole page. So you've got like here the basketball net. And so Rolf had originally drawn that as black and white. I don't think it showed up in that first one, but you can see it here. But then, so I had to isolate those lines and then change them to white without changing all the others. So it's kind of a slightly tricky. So you have to kind of select just those lines, create a different layer, color that, and then in the process, Rolf has to delete the ink line that he does because the white lines will now show up in the color artwork. So when the printer gets it, there's like usually like color artwork and then the black and white artwork, and the printer will combine the two to actually print the thing. So yeah, that's just one kind of strange little detail that you have to deal with sometimes. Actually, if you look in the book, there's a couple instances where I think that one of us messed up, and you can see like there's some black and white artwork that overlaps some of the color holds, so you can look for some of our errors. That's always fun. That's generally when we've given talks at schools, the kids love to point out the errors. They're always happy that they found them and like, did you mean to do this? And we're like, no, but you found it, so congratulations. Let's see. So that's the kind of the overview of how I worked with Iggy. Here's some past things I've worked on. So early on, I did some books for learner books and Graphic Universe, kind of for kids. They're like these were basically kind of choose your own adventure books with fairly simple colors. And these were probably a little more like older kids, but they're like kind of focused on various science. So they got a little more like color experimentation. Here's the second book in the Beware series. This one, this is where I've started really becoming more comfortable with using limited palettes and also just kind of experiment a little bit more. And it was really nice. So this is like one of the first like really limited palettes. This is a flashback that's at the beginning of the book, and so I really wanted to kind of give it a vintagey kind of like different era kind of look. So I went with kind of the like muted oranges and that sort of thing. And I think it kind of gives it a vintagey kind of feel. This was a fun panel because there's color holds, so you got the lightning, and then you also have these silhouettes that Rolf did that I had to kind of figure out how to make those look hazy behind these clouds in the background, clouds of dust. And then you have in the foreground, which I'm not sure if I think I might have gone a little too hardcore on making it dark, but you get the three characters here on the ledge, and there's a gargoyle here, and they get a little lost. So I think I might have gone a little too hard on the contrast. Whoops. But overall, I think it's decent. This is the third book and final one in the trilogy. So we kind of mixed up the palettes. This one, like for the cover, I went for one were blue, but you still kind of want to try to make it look like the similar style as the other ones. This is one we did for with some local artists, and I think Rolf also worked on this one. But it was for I think it's now defunct, but it was like a tween clothing store wanted to create some intellectual property for their store, so they created these characters, and we did like 4 books for them, which were pretty fun. And there's also a local writer, Julia de Villers, who worked on this. She wrote most of the stories, so that was really fun. These are, I think that this is a series now on Disney Junior called Super Kitties. Strangely, the books have not come out yet, I don't know why, because the animation is all done and they're airing episodes. So if you have any toddlers, they would probably appreciate this. And obviously, there's my main collaborators. Jorge is not dead, so please relax. It's okay. He just wasn't there that day for Roth's signing. This is at the Laughing Ogre, and I sent this to the publisher. They really enjoyed this, but he's alive and well in New Jersey. So, but he couldn't make it in for the festival this year, unfortunately. But anyway, I have to give a big shout out to those guys because they basically dragged me into the world of color and graphic novels. And yeah, it's been a great ride. So anyway, I guess we'll leave it up for questions. So does anybody have any questions? Yes.
Can you explain to me the importance of doing flats? I color my own work, and I feel like I'm missing something there because I'm kind of like, if I already know this character's colors are going to be these colors, why don't I just use those as opposed to just random colors to put them in there? It seems like it would take more time to do that, and I just don't understand. I know it's part of the process, I just don't understand why.
Okay, the question is the purpose and kind of strategy behind flatting the work. He's basically saying that if you already know what the characters are going to look like, why don't you just originally plug in those colors? And yeah, that's true. I think, and I've done that. I think for me, it's like when I'm doing the flatting, I'm more of like in a crafting kind of zone. So I'm just like, I just want to get something on the page to kind of like just the placehold the various elements. But you're right. I think in some cases it's just easier to skip that step of doing just kind of random bright colors and just go to right with the as long as you know what the character colors are going to be. I think, honestly, it's more because a lot of colorists use flatters, and so the flatters obviously don't necessarily have the palette in front of them, and so they can just go through and plug in whatever. And I've like used flatters in the past, but generally I like to do it myself to save some money because colors, we don't make a ton of money as it is, so it's nice to nice to reserve a little bit for us. But anyway, I think that answers your question, hopefully. Yes.
So, I notice a lot of times just generally in comics, you'll have some comics that lean towards a more like, you'll have comics that have a very literal sort of choice in colors, like the Beware comics had very literal colors.
Mm-hmm.
The kid is literally a redhead, the other kids have like they're literally wearing purple, But then you have, in Iggy, you have a lot of panels where that's not the case, where you see, the characters, yes, they're wearing a red shirt, but you don't see that red on them.
Right.
So how do you kind of decide when you're going to show those literal colors and when you're being a little bit more like representational and stuff like that?
That's a great question. So the question is, how do I decide whether to use the kind of expected literal colors versus when you're using a more stylized or unexpected color that maybe it's like the tint is off? Is that kind of what you're? Yeah. I mean, yeah. So basically, I guess for me, it would kind of came down to like the age of the audience. So for the Beware books, I kind of stuck with the colors that were kind of expected. So I kind of went with, like the classic skin tones, green grass, brown and green trees, gray castles, stuff like that. And then I tried to like mix it up enough so it didn't feel too boring. And then for Iggy, it's interesting you point that one out because that one, the publisher, First Second, the creative director immediately said, like, we want to get a little bit beyond like the kind of the kid colors, or the kind of obvious colors that you're doing with the Bear books. So that was kind of a tough transition for me, because I've been so used to doing kind of what, like the colors you expect to use, and mixing it up occasionally. But the good thing is that, I think I didn't really need to emphasize the obvious colors so much, because if you look at old like kids cartoons, a lot of times they're very stylized colors, especially some of those old like Warner Brothers and even Disney. Like, they get into some pretty crazy palettes. Like, there's early, I think like the 60s Spider-Man cartoons had some really funky palettes. So anyway, basically, I just needed to kind of break out of that. And so for a lot of the Iggy pages, I would kind of do like a pass, and it was still a little too literal. And so they suggested doing like an overlay. So you can kind of see on some of the pages, there's kind of like a yellow tint or a blue tint. And so we kind of did that to hopefully take away from like the distinct, obvious colors of what the elements were on the page, like, the green grass or the blue sky or whatever, and kind of make it a little more hazy. Yeah, that was tricky, because it's whenever you apply a filter to the whole page, you're changing all the colors on that page. And so you, like, some of the times it looks really good. Like if you put like a warm filter on characters, it gives a nice glow, but then sometimes it can kind of wash out the backgrounds. So I went in and kind of adjusted the contrast and saturation in some of those pages, but it was a lot to go for. I don't know, it'd be interesting. I would love to hear, what people, how people saw those pages in the book, and just the various like settings and stuff. I think there's parts of the book that I think I didn't quite achieve what I was going for. And I don't know if it was just that I didn't, I think like sometimes it looks a little washed out, but that's, I don't know. I come from a more realistic painting background, so it's hard for me to work digitally and get into a more stylized space, if that makes sense. Any other questions? Yes.
Could you give us an estimation for, if you take like a simple, easy page that you could knock out quickly, how long that would take? And a super complicated, like you mentioned, the challenging pages.
Oh, yeah.
Would that take?
Ooh, that's so basically the question was an estimate for a simple, easy to knock out page versus a challenging page, which I kind of talked about in some of these instances. I would say like on a really straightforward page, especially for like, on like maybe Giants Beware, I could do maybe an hour and a half, including like the flattening process, separating the layers, and then doing like final color pass. But then when you get into the more challenging pages, I would say easily probably 2 to 3 hours. And then there's of course there's like the extra half hour where I'm kind of fiddling with colors, or I'm trying different effects. There's in Photoshop, as probably a lot of you know, there's like 1,000 brushes and effects that you can use. So I've tried to cut that down to like maybe 10 brushes that I use in my like little toolbox. And but even then, it's like you can still do quite a bit of variety of effects with that, especially with like modeling the characters and the backgrounds. And so I like to fiddle with those when the page is almost done, because it's just to see what can happen. But generally, I get to the point where I'm like, I got to just abandon this page, and that's usually after about like 3 hours or so. Sometimes probably longer. Does that answer your question? Yes.
So some of the challenging pages that you mentioned, like there was a lot of detail, and you talked about flattening being about calling out the elements.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk about a little more detail about the process in which you decide not to color everything?
Oh yeah. So I guess like for me, like Oh, so the question is the flatting process about like deciding what to color and how that affects the composition of the page. So like on this page, obviously this was kind of a complex page because there's so many elements, mainly just all these buildings, and I wanted it to look stylized, but I also wanted to kind of create an effect of like sort of that kind of like romantic glow, and also just kind of like peaceful setting, but also a vibrant city. So there was a lot to like put in there, and so for this one I kind of just chose. I thought of like the overall composition. So I thought, okay, well this corner, this kind of triangle is going to be the characters and the wall that they're sitting on, and so I tried to keep that fairly simple. And then when I got into the page here, I tried to thought, well, I'd like to have like a few kind of distinct design elements. So I knew like these buildings here, this one here, and this one here would kind of be like the main standouts as far as design. And so I kind of emphasized those with different colors. And basically just to kind of like give like some, what's the word, composition to the page, some kind of like some interesting design elements. So you got kind of like a triangle here, you got kind of a long rectangle here, and basically just to mix it up. And then I thought like, well, then I'll keep the sky very simple. So I just did some kind of little pinkish clouds in the background. But generally, I tried to keep like from coloring too many little things. Like here, I got some little bits of blues, but I tried to keep everything kind of like the rough same level of like saturation or tint, so nothing really stood out too much. But then at the same time, I wanted to emphasize that the sun is peeking through the buildings and creating these kind of nice little hot pockets of color here, which I think are kind of interesting, and which I think add to the setting. So basically it's and like you can see on the page before, where this was my first pass of the colors, and I was like, okay, well that is really fun colors, but there's way too much going on. So I tried to subdue a lot of them and then kind of add in this element of darkness here to kind of balance out all the bright tones and stuff. So anyway, does that
Yeah.
Okay, good, thank you. Yeah. Yes, sir.
How many sessions of revisions do you normally do, or during, like, on a page by page basis?
Okay. He asked how many revisions, how'd you put it?
Like sessions of revisions.
Sessions of revisions do I go through on a page typically? Generally, the good thing is that for the most part, I'll do like one revision, basically just based on Roth's comments, generally for this book, or just the artist comments. But generally, Roth has been pretty easygoing, and he'll just be like, oh, could you just tune down this one element? Like there's like the sky is too purple or something like that. But overall, not too much. It's generally when we get into with the publishers of doing passes where they go through and look for either errors or continuity questions, and then we're talking like probably like 3 more passes, and generally with those it's like a color of like a character's outfit that might have switched somewhere along the line, or they're like, we think this could, the filter on this page could be a little stronger to make it look more, sepia toned or something like that. So, but generally, so it's like basically one pass kind of on my own, and then generally 2 or 3 more, probably 3 more passes with the publisher. So they've got like a whole team going through and editing they're looking like at the dialogue, the speech bubbles, how the speech bubbles are arranged. They're looking at the line art, if there's any like funky lines that are out of place. And then for the colors, they're looking to make sure that they're fairly consistent as far as like characters and settings and all that good stuff. So yeah, so it's yes, sir.
I was wondering, for someone who's doing the line art of the book and then using a separate person for a colorist, what are the best practices for the line artist to best set up their art for the colorist? Easy but as time as possible. I'm especially curious about like, can the line artist do color palettes himself or herself, like if on a separate layer? And is it okay for them to include some of their own shading on a separate layer?
Oh, that's a great question. So he was asking what the best practices are for the line artist setting up the line art for me, or just for them, just for the page itself. Questioning if they can apply color hold themselves, if they can add any shading. And the answer to both of those are yes. And I've had artists do both, and it's kind of nice when they do, because then they'll put like a color hold on a completely separate layer, and then they'll even note that. So what Rolf usually does is he'll have a separate layer for comments. He'll have kind of red inked comments telling me various things about the page, like do this as a sunset for like a blank sky, or like this should be a color hold. As far as like best practices for the line artist, generally I think like if they can do like just a few distinct layers of things. Like I think like it's nice if they can do like a layer of character black and white artwork, background, and then maybe anything that might be in effect, like if it's a light post, or let's say a lightsaber or something like that, which you're going to end up probably doing a color hold on, something like that. That really saves a lot of time. Generally, the artists I've been working with lately have been they've been giving me like several layers of black and white artwork, which can sometimes get confusing, but I like it because it just gives me the opportunity to like try a color hold right away without having to isolate a little bit. So I can just go ahead and just apply a color filter and immediately see like if that works or not. Yeah, I think that's basically the answer to the question. Yes.
It looks like all of the examples that you showed during the presentation were inked digitally, and obviously you're coloring digitally. Have you ever worked with traditional art that's scanned and colored digitally? And like, if there's any effects, like maybe they used ink wash, or maybe they did like a monochrome shadow effect. Like I've been experimenting with like using watercolor and doing the shading in blue or red, or something that I can easily color hold digitally and then change the color of it digitally. Have you experimented with anything like that with traditional art?
A little bit. I guess I think for most of my career as doing color on graphic novels, I've done it almost all digitally. I like doing, because up to that point, I'd worked mainly in like analog, painting and printmaking and ink and stuff like that. So it was kind of an odd switch to suddenly go to all digital. Luckily, my first job when I was actually in college here was I did t-shirt designs, and that's where I discovered Photoshop and got to use a very early version of that. And so I did at least have a kind of comfortable with using a digital tool. But I really would like to use more. I like, even though you can recreate all the effects in like Photoshop and other applications now of digital tools, I often question whether we should be doing that or trying to find like a more digital, actual looking color or effect that's something that, kind of takes it into the future, rather than trying to recreate, Ben-Day dots, stuff like that. Actually, one interesting fact, the guy you're sitting next to, Terry, he's done some he's done some books. He did With Only 5 Plums, which is a graphic novel. And for that, I actually did do some ink washes for the cover and scanned those, and then did some digital line work on top of that. And so it's a 3-part series. If you look for that, it's Terry Eisele, E-I-S-E-L-E. And it's a really moving story from World War II and the Nazi occupation of the Czech Republic. So anyway, but yeah, the question is, I would like to do more analog along with the digital. So yeah, okay. 5 minutes. Any last question? Yes, sir.
Do you use color script, the graphic novel, as you read the script, or do you work it out with Roth or Jorge?
Wait, say that again. Do
Do
I?
you do like a color script of the entire
Do I do? Yeah, the question is, do I do a color script based on the script, or do I work it out kind of along the way? Generally, I've not done a color script. I wish we had the kind of either the time or the organization. Usually it's been too rushed to really sit down and think through. Luckily for Iggy, early on, Roth had sent me some test pages because we were trying to figure out when we were doing how the ghosts should appear. He gave me some of those way early on before we even launched into the full book. So at least that I got to play with some palettes, but also some effects. I would love to be able to plan ahead and actually do a color script. I've not lucked into that situation just yet. There's a book I'm working on right now. We've basically, let's see, we're doing 280 pages in 4 months. So it's so right now I'm coloring 5 pages a day to try to finish it up by the end of October. So I have not had a chance to even think about what the color script would be. But maybe in the future, sometime. But anyway, thank you so much for coming out. I've really, and please, thank you.